I've got the boots that go with my suit of armour, or harness, as most HEMA enthusiasts will insist on my saying. Now, I did have another pair of shoes that I bought, and I thought these at the time were fairly expensive, although actually, in retrospect, they weren't really that expensive. About £50, I think, which, is actually, for what they are, is probably reasonable. But when I took these to my armourer, he was not impressed. Oh, they were court shoes, he said. His principal objection was that they're too open at the top, so that when I wear the greave, the front bottom edge of it would stay not on leather, but would rest instead on the top of my foot, on a sock, on hose. He wanted something a bit more substantial there, so he wanted an ankle boot. He wanted an ankle boot so there would be a decent thickness of leather there for the metal to rest upon, and I suppose he was probably right. Now, I did specify to my shoemaker not to make them too pointy. And I didn't really want them as pointy as this. I wanted the minimum amount of pointiness. So they are a little bit pointy. The significance of this being that these will be given to my armourer, and he will then use these to make the sabatons. He will armour these boots in metal. So the more pointiness you have at the front on the boot, then an awful lot more metal you have where you really don't want a piece of metal. And if you want to run and skip and frolic in your armour, then a big encumbering load of metal right on the end of your foot is not really where you want it. Yes, there were some Gothic sabatons that got really, really pointy and long, but they were either for parades or very definitely when you were on a horse. I'm most of the time in my armour not going to be riding a horse. I'm going to be trying to clump about on the ground, and so I was hoping for a slightly less pointy boot, but never mind. Now, I ordered these a year ago, and they just came today. Now, I was warned when I ordered them, and these were very expensive. These are easily the most expensive pieces of footwear I've ever bought in my life. These are bespoke, though. These are taken from a very precise series of measurements taken from my foot, left and right, both different. I was warned that I wouldn't get it until September, October at the earliest, and it could be November. And then when November came, I was told December, and then January, and then here we are, late February, and I finally got them. This isn't really a complaint so much as an observation of the state of play that seems to exist at the moment, at least in Britain, in the reenactment world. There are so many people wanting bespoke reenactment kit that people have long waiting lists now. The few craftsmen and women who are actually making this sort of stuff seem to be a bit swamped. Anyway, so are they any good then? Well, in terms of the quality of the leather, my experience with leather is that it's extremely difficult to tell. Until leather has really been used, has been soaked in water and then dried out and then bent and then covered in mud and then cleaned and soaked in water again and then bent some more and bashed and scuffed and so forth, you don't really know if the leather's any good. If it can come through all that and still turn out to be really good, strong, pliable leather, then yep, that's good stuff. And I've got a number of pairs of shoes and gloves that have survived all manner of abuse for decades and come back. And other times, leather, first time it gets soaked, first time it gets tested, just falls apart. But I have reasonable faith in this. I think this is decent leather. The leather used in the upper is a lot thicker than you would normally get on a modern shoe. And there are reasons for that, which I'll come to in a moment. It's got a thick sole that's been added onto the bottom with glue, I suspect a modern glue. Now, they did, of course, occasionally glue leather, they did have glues, but this is a sort of a compromise to modernity because I do expect, as do most reenactors, the inevitable, that I'll end up walking on modern surfaces like asphalt, tarmac, concrete, whatever, which are much more wearing on leather shoes than medieval surfaces would have been. So it's a bit of a concession to modernity, but not too bad a one, I think. There's no heel. There's no heel on a medieval boot, okay? Okay, I think I've made that point before, but I'm making it again. No heel. It does up down the side. Now, the reason for this is specific to it being designed to be worn with armour. If you have laces here, with sabatons, you've got lots of articulated lames of metal here moving back and forth. So you don't want the laces here because they'll interfere with the metal articulation and they themselves will get worn and will catch and snap and so forth. So instead, put them down the side of the boot where the metal's not moving around nearly so much, and that should be much more comfortable and practical. However, this is a single piece of leather. There's one end there, knotted at the bottom, and it winds up through all the holes to the top, which is not convenient if you want to get these on and off quickly. These take flipping, I'll show you later just how flipping long it takes to get these on and off. And I think a squire would help, but I don't have a squire. Now these are turn shoes, and I can illustrate the turn shoe better with these because they are made inside out. They're made, oh, there we go. They're made that way round, which means that when you're sewing, you can sew through the thickness of the leather and not actually poke any of the needle's heads and therefore the thread following on to the outside of the shoe. Instead, keep it all on the inside. So the cobbler here has gone through the thickness of the sole and gone sideways through the thickness of the upper, and then round and then back, and has not ever protruded to the outside. And I would say that the quality of the stitching on these is really impressive. I'll show you in some close-ups. One panel, for instance, is a reinforcement for the heel, and there are no stitches showing on the outside. Instead, what you have is just a vague series of bumps, which when they catch the light, you can see they're just a little bit too straight and a little bit too regular, and that's a clue as to where there's a line of stitching. But it's all done on the inside of the boot when it was inside out, of course. So it was much easier for the worker to get at the stitching when he was working than he turned it round at the last minute. There's a seam here. I've no idea why there is a seam here. It seems a superfluous one, but anyway, there is a seam here which has been sewn similarly all on the inside using just the thickness of the leather, and you have to pull the leather apart that way to see the stitches from the outside. And why would you do that? So these are the boots I will be giving my armourer to make into sabatons. And I think they're quite a nice colour. It's a sort of very sort of orangey beige, and even more beige down below. Now to show you just how difficult they are to get on and off. Right, well, I've heaved and tugged and what have you to get all these various laces open. So let's see if I can get my foot in it now. Is it open enough to get my foot in? Come on. A conventional shoe horn that you would use on a modern shoe isn't going to help much. Come on. Oh, maybe nearly. Okay, I'm in. Right, so now I've got to lace things up. So I've got to pull that one taut, pull that one taut, and phew, and we're there. Right, so now this long end, which you see is completely needed because you need all this amount of slack to open it enough to get it on and off. But I'm going to wrap it round now by tucking it through there and then going round once, twice, 3 times, and then tucking in again. There. So I think now that should stay on. Okay. So now, when at the moment if I bend my foot like that, my heel comes away from the sole. But I'm hoping when this gets more supple that won't happen. Right. So now, so it's on. Can I get it off? Okay, that much was easy. This will get easier as these holes get worn and it becomes, oh, you don't want to pull the end out. Yes. Okay, good. I can pull there. Oops. This is so stiff. I think I'm going to have to pull from the inside. Okay. Have I done enough? Yeah, come on. Yes! Whew, it'll get easier. It'll get easier. I have found a flaw with these shoes, which is that there is one stitch, just one stitch here, just there, which is poking through on the outside. So as the cobbler was sewing in the reinforcement here from the inside and trying to keep his needle within the thickness of the walls of the upper, his needle accidentally just once poked through to the outside and carried with it a tiny little bit of thread. And I like it. I think that makes these shoes better. It shows that they're handmade and that there was a craftsman, a fallible craftsman, who was otherwise stitching excellently. Lindybeige!